Hi Gigi, come share an apple with me. I picked it fresh from Granny Smith's sinister tree. Don't mind my stories, you'll soon see. They're as dark and disturbing as they can be. Murmurs of secrets, bloody sodden crimes, Granny's bone-clicking tales will twist your mind. You'll be hanging on my words from the edge of your seats. Now how'd you like to go dig up some bodies with me? So go grab a shovel and gather around, 'cause 8 feet under is where they'll be found. This podcast contains detailed discussions of real-life crimes, which may include descriptions of violence, sensitive subject matter, and other potentially distressing content. Listener discretion is strongly advised. The material is intended for mature audiences only and may not be suitable for children or those who may find such topics triggering. What's up, grave diggers? Welcome back to 8 Feet Under with Granny Smith. I literally just recorded episode 13 yesterday, so I don't really have any tea or updates or anything to give you because nothing happened. I don't think I even left my house. The story that I have today, I feel like I saw a movie about it. I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like I did. I know there's an episode, I think, on Unsolved Mysteries, but I feel like there was something else I saw on it. And then maybe I heard it covered on another podcast. But anyways, this is one that sticks with me because I need more answers than what have been provided. So let's get into it. Today's story is about a crime that crosses decades, states, and questions that have never been answered. 2 priests dedicated to their communities, to their faith, vanished from life under unsettling, similar, and disturbing circumstances. One was found murdered, the other one disappeared without a trace. The men never knew each other, yet their cases have been tangled together in crime files, rumors, and speculation for more than 40 years. So go grab those bedazzled shovels so we can dig 8 feet into the story of Father Reynaldo John Rivera and Father John Patrick Kerrigan, 2 clergymen whose deaths remain unsolved mysteries that have haunted investigators in New Mexico and Montana for more than 40 years. So before we get into these 2 cases that would later be compared side by side, we need to kind of lay down a broader timeline because the early 80s were already producing a string of disappearances that would eventually swirl around this mystery. So we're going to travel back in time a little bit to June 13th, 1982. James Otis Anderson, 54-year-old Episcopal priest, I don't know if that's how you say that, disappeared from Townsend, Montana. Anderson was previously working with Father John Patrick Kerrigan in White Sulphur Springs, Montana. Anderson was last seen driving on Highway 12 in Townsend toward White Sulphur Springs at 8 a.m. He was declared dead in absentia 7 years later. Is it absentia or absentia? Absentia. Whatever. You know what I mean. At the time, there's no confirmed evidence linking Anderson's disappearance to what happens next. But it becomes one of the cases people point to when they ask how many clergy disappearances are too many to ignore. Now we go back to New Mexico, specifically Santa Fe, New Mexico. Father Reynaldo John Rivera was born on October 29th, 1924. He spent his entire priestly career serving in New Mexico. He was a Catholic priest of the Franciscan order and served as a priest at the Cathedral Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi in Santa Fe. To many people in Santa Fe, he wasn't just a priest, he was more like family. Brother Bruce McKellick, one of Rivera's Franciscan brothers in faith, stated, quote, "I think he may be considered one of Santa Fe's favorite sons," end quote. On the night of August 5th, 1982, the phone rang at the rectory of St. Francis Cathedral. A man identifying himself as Michael Carmelo said that his grandfather was dying of a heart attack near a rest stop in Waldo, New Mexico, south of Santa Fe. He asked for a priest to come immediately administer last rites to his grandfather. So the priest who answered the phone was Father Patrick Gerard. Gerard declined because his eyesight was too poor to safely drive at night, and he asked the man to call back later. So 15 minutes later, the phone rings again. This time, Father Rivera answered, and Rivera said yes. The caller told Rivera to meet him at the La Bajada rest stop on Interstate 25 and said he would be waiting in a blue pickup truck. So Rivera left the rectory in his brown 1974 Chevrolet Malibu. And that was the last time anyone saw Father Rivera alive. But almost immediately, the pieces didn't fit clearly. Shit was a little suspicious. Investigators would later learn that the payphone at the La Bajada rest stop, the phone that the caller claimed to be using, was out of order. As reporter Steve Terrell, who covered the story for the Santa Fe New Mexican, put it, quote, One of the details that fascinated me the most, the phone call. The guy said he was at the rest stop at La Bajada when he called Father Rivera to meet him there. But the payphone there, this is the days before cell phones, the payphone there was broken, so he had to have called from someplace else. End quote. My question is, why would someone whose grandfather was dying call a priest and not call for help, like call an ambulance? Why not call 911 first and then call a priest to meet them at the hospital? I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to me. The math don't math. So clergy later explains that when someone calls in distress asking for anointing, many priests don't interrogate the request. They just rush because that's the job. That's the vow. That's the service that they are there to provide, so they just kind of go along with it and don't really ask questions. Brother Bruce states, quote, he gets a call at nighttime. Most places would probably say, sorry, we can't come out. It's too late. Call us tomorrow. But he decided that that's what he's there for, to serve the people, so he went without question, end quote. 2 days later, on August 7th, 1982, Father Rivera's body was discovered in a field near Waldo exit on Interstate 25, close to the La Bajada rest stop, about 1 mile south of it. Rivera had been shot once in the stomach. He had also been strangled with a wire, possibly a coat hanger, and then there was evidence suggesting that he may have been restrained for hours before he died. His Malibu was not found at the body site, but it did turn up later, parked at a rest stop on Interstate 40 near Grants, New Mexico, and the Malibu was locked and out of gas. Several items were missing and never recovered. His wallet, his glasses, and his keychains. Investigators do believe that 2 people were involved in Rivera's murder. That murder rocked Santa Fe. Steve Terrell states, quote, the murder of Father Rivera was one of the biggest crime stories, end quote. So people try to wrap their minds around it. Terrell also states, quote, I was just thinking, God, who would have done such a thing? It started with a call to the cathedral on August 5th, end quote. So the call, the broken payphone, the missing kit, the moved vehicle, the strangulation, the single gunshot, the field, it just didn't all seem random to investigators. So the FBI gets involved and they produce a psychological portrait of the person or people responsible for this murder. The forensic psychologist's conclusion was revenge. Retired Deputy Chief Gilbert Ulibarri, who worked the case with New Mexico State Police, believed that the motive was rooted in something personal. He stated, quote, they wanted somebody in the cathedral. Something in that person's life happened that involved the cathedral and a priest. I'm not saying it was Father Rivera, just revenge, end quote. So Santa Fe police theorized that the killer was someone familiar with the Catholic Church, but who also felt betrayed. Investigators processed Rivera's car and recovered a set of unknown fingerprints. They chased leads for years, identified numerous suspects, and still nothing held on long enough to become a name. A recent parolee was briefly investigated but ruled out due to an alibi and fingerprints that didn't match. A former Santa Fe resident who moved to New York was also considered, and then later, after another separate case put a name on law enforcement's radar, police also looked at James Harry Reyes, who became a suspect in the homicide of Reverend Patrick Ryan in Odessa, Texas on December 21st, 1981. When Reyes surfaced as a suspect in that case, police questioned him about Rivera's murder as well. But still, no suspect has ever been identified in Father Rivera's killing. Detective Gilbert worked the case relentlessly. He stated, quote, I traveled to New York, Sacramento, Montana, just too many places that we worked the case, end quote. He interviewed hundreds of suspects, and he even traveled with a psychic trying anything that might crack the silence. But eventually, the case went cold. Steve Terrell stated, quote, it was definitely a letdown. Of course, other murders came along, not of priests, but people tend to forget, end quote. But the people who loved Rivera did not forget. Brother Bruce still remembers the funeral, and he states, quote, I still remember the procession from the cathedral to Rosario Cemetery. We walked through the streets of Santa Fe, and there were just thousands of people. It was amazing, end quote. Decades later, Brother Bruce also says, to this day, when I pass by there, I always say a prayer for Father Reynaldo when I drive by the rest stop, because it just brings back all those memories, end quote. Decades later, Rivera's case is still open. Lieutenant Mark Soriano of New Mexico State Police stated, quote, this is still, in our eyes, an active investigation, end quote. The file is now being handled by the New Mexico State Police Cold Case Unit, and Lieutenant Mark also stated that in 2021, investigators were led to Texas, where an inmate there got fingerprints and DNA standards to compare to the forensic evidence at the scene, but it was another dead end. Still, investigators insisted the goal remains the same. Lieutenant Mark says, quote, "Any investigator that puts their eyes on a cold case investigation has the same goal as the last investigator that looked at it, and that's to resolve the investigation and bring closure to that case." End quote. Now, 2 years after Rivera's murder, another priest disappears, and suddenly investigators start seeing echoes. So now we're going to take a trip to Ronan, Montana in July of 1984. So 2 years later, nearly 1,000 miles away, another priest vanished under eerily similar circumstances. The Reverend Father John Patrick Kerrigan, who was born on January 20th, 1926. He had served in Plains, Montana before being transferred to Sacred Heart Catholic Church in Ronan, Montana on July 18th, 1984. 2 days after he arrived, he was gone. So on the evening of July 20th, 1984, Kerrigan left a bakery in downtown Ronan. Some accounts identify it specifically as Donald's Bakery and placed the time about 11 p.m. He reportedly stopped to chat with parishioners and mentioned he planned to attend a funeral and a wedding the next day, and then he walked away. That was the last confirmed sighting of him. Missing persons report was filed on July 23rd. Several days later, bloodied clothing belonging to Kerrigan was found along Montana Highway 35 near the shores of Flathead Lake, close to Paulson, about 5 miles from Ronan. So one detail had investigators a little chilled. The clothing appeared in a pile described as neatly folded. Alongside the clothing was a blood-stained coat hanger, tangled and deformed. There was a $100 bill that was still in the pocket of his shirt, so robbery wasn't the motive. Now, on July 30th, Kerrigan's vehicle was discovered abandoned near Paulson, Montana, and the vehicle was another point of an eerie overlap. It was a brown Chevrolet Malibu, just like Father Rivera's. In the trunk, investigators found Kerrigan's wallet containing $1,200, blood-stained pillowcase, a blood-stained shovel, and in some accounts, there was a box with hundreds of dollars in it. The car keys were found about 30 yards away, lying in tall grass. No other trace of Kerrigan was ever found. His remains have never been recovered, but investigators do believe that he was murdered. So, following Kerrigan's disappearance, New Mexico law enforcement was notified because of the similarities to Rivera's murder. The parallels investigators listed were unsettling. Both victims were around 48. Both drove brown Chevrolet Malibus. In both cases, the vehicles were moved away from where the crime likely happened. In both cases, there was evidence involving wire or coat hangers. Rivera was strangled with the wire, possibly a coat hanger. Kerrigan had a bloody coat hanger found along with his clothing. And there was one more connection that made law enforcement's spidey senses start tingling. Kerrigan had actually spent time in New Mexico, specifically in 1983 in Jimenez Springs, New Mexico. Investigators learned that Kerrigan spent nearly a year in 1983 at the Congregation of Servants of the Paraclete in Jimenez Springs, New Mexico. So this facility was used as a retreat for clergy dealing with personal difficulties such as alcoholism, depression, and sexual misconduct. I will hold all my comments about sexual misconduct in the Catholic Church until the end. Moving on. So the Diocese of Helena admitted that Kerrigan had been there, but never disclosed the reason. And allegedly, all those records from that center were destroyed. So the reason for Kerrigan's stay there was never made public. Now, no evidence was found that Kerrigan and Rivera ever knew one another, but the shadow of connection still remains. In November of 1984, Lieutenant Gilbert expressed what he called a quote-unquote gut feeling, and he stated, quote, "I have a gut feeling the crimes are related, likely committed by a drifter who has a psychological problem with priests," end quote. But years later, in 1992, New Mexico State Police Detective Eric Lucero insisted, quote, "There is no connection whatsoever," end quote. But by August of 2022, Lieutenant Gilbert publicly stated that he does not believe the crimes are connected. Now, the cases were still profiled together, including in 1988 on NBC's Unsolved Mysteries, but no leads that came from the show ever turned into any type of answers. So 2 days after Kerrigan's disappearance, another man vanished. On July 22nd of 1984 in Missoula, Montana, Curtis Holman, a 31-year-old school teacher, went missing from Missoula. Holman called his girlfriend and told her that he would meet her at a movie theater in Missoula. 12 days later, his truck was found abandoned on an old logging road about 40 miles from where Kerrigan's car was found, but there were no signs of violence. Holman was described as a backpacker and a survivalist. He was married and divorced, and it's noted that he was possibly bisexual. Holman's brother believed that there may have been a link to Kerrigan's disappearance due to the proximity and the time and location, and possibly links to homosexuality, but law enforcement never found any clear connection. Holman's whereabouts and remains are still unknown. The earlier disappearance in 1982 of priest James Otis Anderson remains a footnote, unlinked officially, but impossible for some people to ignore. Now we're fast forwarding to 2011. Two groups of individuals brought a class action lawsuit against the Diocese of Helena for sexual abuse. In 2015, the diocese published a list of 80 clergy members suspected or implicated in sexual abuse of minors. John Kerrigan was included on that list. And this matters because it changes the way some people view the motive, especially when you combine it with the hidden reason that Kerrigan was sent to that retreat in Jimenez Springs in 1983. Now, as always, there is an alternative theory. In 2020, author Brian D'Ambrosio, who wrote Montana Murders, Notorious and Unsolved, said that he had gained access to the notes from the lead detective on the Kerrigan case, and based on those notes, Brian suggested his alternative theory. He thinks that Kerrigan may have staged the crime scene and faked his own death, possibly with the assistance from the diocese. It does remain a theory and not a proven fact. So, what do we have here? Two priests, two states, two mysteries. Father Reynaldo Rivera answered a call for last rites on August 5th, 1982, and was found murdered on August 7th, shot once in the stomach, strangled with a wire, and left in a field near La Bajada. Father John Patrick Kerrigan disappeared on July 20th, 1984, and was never recovered. Only his bloody clothing, a coat hanger, and his abandoned car near Polson and Flathead Lake. Were these crimes connected, or were they separate tragedies that only look alike from a distance? Some investigators believe a single predator targeted both priests. Others rejected the idea completely. And the truth is, evidence can really point both ways. But one thing is undeniable. Communities lost two men who dedicated their lives to service, one murdered, one vanished, and neither case has ever fully been resolved. Somewhere, though, the truth is out there, waiting to be found. And that, Granny's Gravediggers, is the story of the murders of priest Reynaldo Rivera and John Kerrigan. Now you know what time it is. Shovels up, time to debrief and discuss. Now I know what I'm about to say is about to get some folks' britches in a bunch, so let me be clear before I say it. I am not accusing either priest of sexual abuse. However, it did immediately cross my mind. Am I wrong? Are we still ignoring the little hiccup in the Catholic Church that's been swept under the rug for years? Hundreds of innocent children were sexually assaulted. So for me, it is a possibility that these were revenge killings. Who knows? I'm not saying that sexual abuse only happens in the Catholic Church. So don't come for me. I know it can happen in any kind of church. It happens everywhere. People in power or authority abuse their positions. People who know that children will likely look up to them or trust them, like priests, coaches, teachers, police officers. The list goes on and on and on. I know it happens everywhere. I'm just saying in this specific story, it is likely. I would definitely like to know why Father Kerrigan was sent to that so-called retreat in Jimenez Springs, and then all of a sudden these records of why he was there were destroyed. I don't know. Tell me what you think. What are your theories? Do you think they're separate crimes or one person? Or it could have been that neither priest was a pervert and was killed as revenge for something someone else did. Maybe it was a person who was violated by a priest or had some type of animosity towards priests and was just killing any priest he or she came across. That's possible. But you guys know how I feel about these unsolved mysteries. I need answers. Somebody knows something. The truth is out there somewhere. But as always, let me know what you think. Keep the suggestions coming. Hope you enjoyed the story. DM me on all the social media platforms. The handle is the number 8 FTUNDERGS85. And until next crime, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, an apple a day keeps a motherfucking murderers away. Granny love ya. Bye.